Let's, yes, Jeff?
Anybody drive a gray Nissan? They've left the interior lights on.
Gray Nissan, headlights are on. Gray Nissan. Maybe back in the children's department. Okay, we're going to jump in. We have kind of an abbreviated night with business meeting coming up. So we're going to be in chapter 28. I hope to get through all of it. Let's go ahead and go to the first slide here. You preach the whole counsel of God, and this is what it is right now. Judgment. It's all about the judgment of God, and we should worship the Lord in His blessings, and we should worship the Lord in His judgments. So we just kind of got through the judgment on all the nations, and so it took me half the journey to kind of figure out what was going on. But why all of this judgment upon the nations for Judah, which is the primary audience, is that God was pointing at Judah and saying, look around you and look at all of these nations who are being judged by me, and judgment is coming upon you as well. It's a warning sign. It's almost as we look out into the world and we see all the things that are going on in our world, and we see God's judgment upon the things of the world, and we should be warned, and we too should not participate in those kind of behaviors which God will judge. The chapter for tonight, I had to when you don't know your own notes, you're in trouble, right? The chapter, it's actually chapter. I was going to try to do a couple, but abbreviated night, we can't do everything in one night. So the chapters that we have for tonight, still judgment, and we're going to be talking about now, he's been talking about Judah, and now he shifts to talking about the city of Jerusalem. And so still the same, a lot of the same, Assyria coming to judge. And the Lord is urging Judah to turn to Him instead of the surrounding nations. He's their protection. He's their God. And so let's look at, next slide, let's go ahead, we're going to go to chapter 28 of 2nd Chronicles, because I want to remind you of something. So you can go ahead and turn over there. I'm going to kind of hop, skip, and jump through that chapter, and because this is the historical record, narrative, what was going on in Judah when Isaiah was prophesying. King Ahaz. So he was a king of Judah, and he's actually the father of King Hezekiah. You probably recognize his name. So King Ahaz, in chapter 28, the first several verses there, he did not do what was right in the sight of the Lord. It says, Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem, and he did not do what was right in the sight of the Lord as his father David had done. Then it describes, for he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. Now the kings of Israel had actually just attacked Judah. Israel and Syria attacked Judah, if you remember that. We looked at some of that in Isaiah. And so now King Ahaz says, well, Israel must be, this is northern kingdom. Israel is prospering and doing so well, so I'll just become like them. And he made molten images for the Baals. He burned incense in the valley of the sons of Hinnom. This is where we get the valley of Gehenna. So that's the Greek version of this valley of Hinnom. What did they do in there? They burned their children. Burned their children according to the abomination of the nations whom the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel. Verse 4, he sacrificed and burned incense on the high places, on the hills, and under every green tree. Now eventually, so he basically turned all of Judah into idolatry and all the trappings that go along with it. And we're going to look in Isaiah tonight. We're going to hear him talking about drunkenness, and we'll talk about that as it relates to idolatry. And so, idolatry is not as, quote, innocent as having a little statue that you bow to and you say Alibaba and the whatever. It was sexual immorality, it was drunkenness, it was drug abuse, it was slavery. I mean, there was a lot of bad things that went along with the pagan religion. So Ahaz turned Judah all over to that. Now, Ahaz also tried to make alliances with Assyria, and it'll tell us later that he worshiped the gods of Damascus. So let's just read some of those verses there. Look at verse 16 here. By the way, I just skipped a whole section. And what that whole section is talking about is how Israel, so he followed in the ways of Israel. So he went after the kings of Israel. He did what the kings of Israel did. What did the king of Israel do? They defeated Judah. And this is a recurring theme here. Verse 16. And at the same time, King Ahaz went to the kings of Assyria to help him, because he was being attacked by the Edomites, verse 17, the Philistines, so on and so forth. And it says, verse 19, for the Lord brought Judah low because of Ahaz, king of Israel, for he had encouraged moral decline in Judah and had been continually unfaithful to the Lord. So verse 20, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came to him. So he tried to make an alliance with the king of Assyria. And he came to him and distressed him and did not assist him. So what did he do? He required King Ahaz to pay tribute. How did King Ahaz get his tribute? He went and took all the articles from the temple and cut them up, and he paid off the king of Assyria in the gold of the temple. So he tried to make an alliance with Israel. Israel attacked him. He tried to make an alliance with Assyria. Assyria distressed him, made him pay tribute. Verse 23, for he sacrificed to the gods of Damascus, which had defeated him, and saying, because the gods of the kings of Syria helped them, well, I will sacrifice them to them that they may help me. What? But they were the ruin of him and all of Israel. There's a great lesson here. The things that we think that will help us out in the world, when we turn to them, only end up hurting us. And that's exactly the lesson of King Ahaz. Now, this is the context that we're going to get into tonight in Isaiah chapter 28. So we can go ahead and turn there. So the things that King Ahaz turned out to be his greatest demise. All right, go ahead and go to the next slide. So let's go over to Isaiah 28. Here, finishing that up. Sadly, neither King Ahaz nor the people turned to the Lord. They never in chapter 28 of 2 Chronicles does it say, and they turned to the Lord and sought his help. Where comes my help? From where comes my help? My help comes from the Lord. And so judgment was coming upon Judah and their capital city of Jerusalem. So we start in chapter 28. Next slide. It starts with judgment on Ephraim. Judgment on Ephraim. I actually put the New Living Translation up there for chapter 28 and verse 1. It's a lot clearer. And so reading that, it says, what sorrow awaits the proud city of Samaria. So Samaria was the city. Ephraim was the major tribe of the northern kingdom of Israel. This is Israel, northern kingdom. Samaria was the capital. Ephraim was the major tribe. There were 10 tribes in the northern kingdom. Ephraim was the big one. And so, what sorrow awaits the proud city of Samaria, the glorious crown of the drunks of Israel. I couldn't help but laugh at that. The glorious crown of a bunch of drunks. It goes on to say, it sits at the head of a fertile valley. And it does. Samaria is at the head of the Jezreel Valley. And the Jezreel Valley, to this day, never been there. Castleberries and the Harrises will tell us what it looks like in a month or so. But it's full of farming, vegetation, and almond trees and all that kind of stuff, olive trees. And it sits at the head of this fertile valley, but its glorious beauty will fade like a flower. It is the pride of the people brought down by wine. Drunkenness is the big sin that is mentioned here. And I will tell you a little bit about that. The pagan religion had two, let's say, staples, ordinances to their worship. One was sexual immorality. Now, I can't get it in my head that the pagans believed that having immoral sex with a prostitute, which they called priestesses, was somehow communing with God. A lot of their gods were fertile gods, gods of fertility, Diana and some of those others. And they believed that having immoral relations with these prostitutes called priestesses, that they were actually worshiping God that way. The other way that they worshiped God was through the consumption of alcohol. And they believed that in the stupor of drunkenness, that they were actually communing with the gods. There was actually gods of wine. And they believed that that's how that they would worship these gods. Well, that is just foreign to me. Foreign to, we're going to worship God through immoral sex and getting drunk. That's just crazy. But that's what they believed about that. Well, we know in our world the consequences of those two behaviors. They're not good. There's nothing good about them. They, just humanly speaking, it destroys a person's life. Not even counting the spiritual component of that, but just humanly speaking, it destroys people. So this is what Israel was doing. And, only reading my history books, at this time, Israel was truly, northern tribes, was truly growing weak, especially in their leadership, through, guess what? Sexual immorality and drunkenness. So I try to take the Bible as literal as possible. And this is what the Lord, through Isaiah, is prophesying. He says, Israel is destroying herself with sexual immorality and drunkenness. Now, who's the primary audience? Judah. And so God is saying, Judah, listen, look north and see what Israel's doing to itself. Why would you ever go after the kings of Israel? Remember what King Ahaz did? Why would you ever go after the king of Israel? They're destroying themselves with this ungodly, sinful behavior. Verses 5 and 6, skipping down a little bit. In that day, the Lord of hosts will be for a crown of glory and a diadem of beauty to the remnant of his people. Again, we mentioned the remnant. One thing that I am seeing in studying Isaiah is there's a lot of judgment. But there's always a faithful remnant. And that's a really big component to the book of Isaiah. There's always a few people who are faithful. I think I'm looking at a faithful remnant tonight. I mean, do we live in a world that is full of sexual immorality and drunkenness and drug abuse and all of those things? We may not say it's worshiping a God, but some people run to it like it is worship. But we're that faithful remnant that's going to hold out. And we're not going to give ourselves to those things. We see, and we can all stand up probably and testify and tell how those sins have ruined families, ruined marriages, ruined people. And why would we ever go to that? Why would we ever do that? And that's what God is saying to Judah. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Verses 7 and 8. But they also have erred through the wine and through intoxicating drink are out of the way. The priests and the prophets. Now, don't think priests like the priests that worked at the temple in Jerusalem. These are not those priests. These are pagan priests. And their prophets. Don't think like Isaiah's a prophet and Jeremiah's a prophet. No, these are the pagan prophets. And what do? They also are a bunch of alcoholics. They err through intoxicating drink. It goes on to say, verse 8, for all tables are full of vomit and filth. No place is clean. That's a pretty picture. Would y'all put that on those little cross-stitch things, and would you put it in your... Not all Bible verses, not all Bible verses deserve the cross-stitch, does it? This is one of them. But you get the picture, don't you? I mean, intoxicating drink, what's it cause you to do? Makes you throw up. And actually, they would actually cause themselves to regurgitate so that they could drink more. The alcohol in those drinks would absorb into the bloodstream, but they would be so full of liquid they would need to regurgitate, vomit, so that they could drink more. That's an ugly picture, isn't it? This is what the Bible says. This is how it describes it. Now, verse 9, 10, and 11. I learned something every time I open the Bible, or here's something that I learned. I'm going to admit to you, verse 10, and then also kind of repeated in verse 13, for precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line. Here a little, there a little. I've always kind of looked at that verse and said, that's how you learn. You know, you just build your ABCs, turns into words, turns into sentences, turns into paragraphs, and then you can write full pages. That's really not what that means. I'm not going to use that verse that way anymore. Looking in the Hebrew language, this is like repeating sounds of the letters, like ya, 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 and ba, 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 and da, 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 and that's what it's talking about. So listen to what it says. It says, whom will you teach knowledge, and whom will he make to understand the message? To those just weaned from milk, babies, infants, those just drawn from the breast. So little babies, maybe a year old, little babies. He's talking about these priests and prophets. Who's their knowledge for? It's just for babies. That's all they can say. And then he says, they gibber and jabber like baby talk, or like a drunkard. In verse 11, for with stammering lips and another tongue, he will speak to this people. That's quoted. I learned something else. In 1 Corinthians 14:21, talking about speaking in tongues in the Corinthian church. And I've been convinced for a long time that they really weren't speaking in genuine tongues. They were making it up, sort of like we know happens today in our culture. They were kind of making it up. They were doing this jibber jabber stuff. So really what verse 10, 11, they have nothing to say, nothing worthy of saying. They're supposed to be priests and prophets, and all they can do is jibber jabber like a baby, or jibber jabber like a drunk. Sounds like foreign words. Now he turns that on its head a little bit, and he says, verse 12, to whom he said, this is your rest with which you may cause the weary to rest, and this is the refreshing, yet they would not hear. Verse 12 is the genuine message of God. God is saying, I am offering you rest. I am offering you a refreshing, but you wouldn't listen to me. Verse 13, but the word of the Lord was to them jibber jabber, baby talk. So he says, when they jibber jabber and baby talk, we can't understand a word they're trying to tell us. But when God tries to speak to them, it was jibber jabber baby talk. And then it goes on to say that they might go and fall backward and be broken and snared and caught. So end result is they're not listening to God, and anything that they say you can't understand anything they're talking about. Just an interesting note, I read this. One of the things that the pagan priests and prophets did, and I think about Elijah and the prophets of Baal. You remember that? That little, that's one episode that we get to see how the Baal prophets acted. And they yelled out and they screamed and they chanted and they cut themselves. And that may be as well what this is talking about. It's just inaudible screaming and yelling and hollering. It makes absolutely no sense. And to say all of that, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. He says to Jerusalem, verse 14, and this is what you want? This is what you want to be like? This is what you're chasing after? Remember King Ahaz. He went after the kings of Israel. This is what you want? Therefore, verse 14, therefore hear the word of the Lord, you scornful men, who rule this people who are in Jerusalem. So he's talking about King Ahaz. These are the rulers of Judah. He said, you want that? You want what Israel's got? Verse 15, this is the covenants that they made with all of these surrounding nations. So I'll name a few of them. They tried to make an alliance with Assyria. That backfired on them. They tried to make an alliance with Damascus. That backfired on them. They tried to make an alliance with Israel, the northern kingdom. That backfired on them. They also were trying, they had not yet, but they were trying to make an alliance with Egypt. I'll just go ahead and tell you, that backfired on them as well. So what verse 15 tells us is all of these alliance covenants. See, we have made covenants with death. Sheol is the grave, although you can make a good case that that could speak of what we think of as, or what we call hell today. So you're making a covenant with death, you're making an agreement with Sheol, that's a Hebrew word, the place of the departed spirits. And he says, all of these things, I mean, why would you make a covenant with death? Why would you make a covenant with the grave? That don't make any sense. It's obviously he's saying, what you are trying to align yourself with, it's going to cause your death. It's going to bring you to an early grave. And God says, it's all going to come to nothing. He goes on to say, read verse 15, because you said, we have made a covenant with death, and with Sheol we are in agreement when the overflowing scourge passes through. I think that's probably talking about Assyria, the attack of Syria. It will not come to us, for we have made lies our refuge, and under falsehood we have hidden ourselves. I can only think when that passage talks about refuge and hiding place. That's what God is. God is our refuge. God is our hiding place. And what did they make their refuge and hiding place? Lies and falsehoods. And reality, that's what it was. King of Assyria said, yeah, we'll help you. When it came time to help them, they said, for a fee. And they had to use the gold of the temple to pay the Assyrians for what they thought would be their protection, which in turn, when it all came down, the Assyrians didn't protect them, they actually attacked them. Egypt did the same thing. Egypt said, yeah, we'll protect you for a fee. Judah paid the fee. When it came time to protect them, Egypt said, sorry, we're going to have to protect ourselves. It's kind of like we get mad at insurance companies. I don't know about y'all, but I pay a pretty good price for insurance. And when it comes time to use it, I have to pay for it anyway. It's like, why do I have insurance? Well, that's kind of the way this insurance was for them. Verse 16, here's some good news. Here's some good news. Verse 16. Therefore, thus saith the Lord, you made your refuge was lies, your hiding place was falsehoods. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, I lay in Zion a stone, a foundation. That's solid. That's something that you can, as we say, hang your hat on, put your feet on. It's the rock that the wise man builds his house upon the rock. The foolish man builds his house upon the sand. A tried stone, a precious stone, a sure foundation. Whoever believes will not act hastily. Let me talk a little bit of that. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Will not act hastily. There's two verses of Scripture that directly quote this in the New Testament. Romans 9:33, 1 Peter 2:6. And both of them say at the end, and whoever believes on him, obviously we're talking about Jesus, aren't we? I guess I should have said that first. This is Jesus. Isaiah 28:16, a prophecy of Jesus Christ. For sure, because Romans 9:33, because of 1 Peter 2:6. Whoever believes in him will by no means be put to shame. Act hastily. How do we get from act hastily to put to shame? It is panic. Whoever believes in him will not panic. That's the idea. When troubles come, when difficulties arise, when the army is on the horizon, the enemy army is on the horizon, we have put our trust in the Lord and we will not panic because we know that the Lord's going to take care of us. And that's the idea. If you believe in him, you're not going to be put to shame. God's not going to let you down. A promise of the future plan for Israel, absolutely. This is the prophecy of the Messiah. But certainly, Israel had to be for the Messiah to come to be, because Jesus came through the nation of Israel. And we can go into all that, but by the way, Israel's still around today. And that's a reminder that when God says he will do something, we can be sure he will do it. Well, in the immediate, what's God saying? Judgment, judgment, judgment. But in the long term, God has a plan to save Israel. This kind of crossed my mind. Is any time that you do a remodeling project for a house, whatever, what's the first thing you got to do?
Tear it down.
So you got to tear some stuff down. Tear down walls, take up carpet, whatever you got to do. You got to get rid of the stuff you don't want first. This is what God's doing in Israel. You got to take the stuff down you don't want. God's judgment is ridding Israel of the things he does not want, so that he can make room for this new foundation, who is the Lord Jesus Christ. Next slide. We're running out of time, so I got to be quick. So the rest of this just continues to talk about God's judgment. Verse 19, I'll bring out verse 19. It says, as often as it goes out, it will take you. And it says, for morning by morning it will pass over, and by day and by night it will be a terror just to understand the report. What's that saying? Enemy army on the horizon. They come back and they give a report morning by morning, day by day, and it actually strikes them with paralyzing terror just to hear the report. What they thought was going to be their security turns out to be a daily terror to them. What did God say? Whoever believes will not act hastily, will not panic. Instead of trying to make all these alliances and going after the gods of Damascus and the kings of Israel, what should they have done? Very simple answer. Turn to God and seek Him. If you believe in Him, you won't panic. I like the verse 20. They made their beds, so they had to lie in them. The only problem was the bed was too short and the covers weren't wide enough. Kind of like all the beds that John Owen and I sleep in. Our feet hang over the edge. My wife always asks, why do you have such cold feet? Because my feet are on the end of the bed. And my covers aren't long enough. That's kind of the way Israel was. Next slide. Yeah, we're running out of time. Go ahead and go to the end. I got to mention the parable of the farmer. Go back one. So 24 through 28, the parable of the farmer. I don't have time to look at that. We may look at that next week if we have time. It teaches us, and I always like farming parables, okay? Just because of who I am. Each crop requires its own set of skills and ways of doing things. You don't plant tomatoes in the same way that you plant corn. Furthermore, you don't harvest tomatoes in the same manner that you harvest corn. Now, they were threshers, so there were certain, and I don't even understand all the black mullein and all that. I don't even know what that is. But there's certain crops that you really got to beat the tar out of it because it's got a really coarse, hard husk, because you just got to beat it really hard. And then there's some that you just kind of beat it gently. If you beat it too hard, then you ruin the good stuff on the inside. This is basically what he's saying. Now, what does that mean? It means that there are times that God just needs to beat the tar out of us. And then there are times, or maybe even people, we should say, when God rebukes us gently. This is what he's saying. And I think what he's saying to both Israel, but especially to Judah, he's saying, now if you want me to, I'll beat the tar out of you. But I can also be gentle in the manner in which and it's all up to you, what you decide to do. He'd given them warning after warning after warning. Okay, and then next slide, there's a lot of writing that I thought it was good, so I copied it for you. Next slide. Well, we too may think that, everybody else is being judged and God won't ever judge us. We're immune. That's what Judah thought. I didn't even really bring that out. But Judah thought that because, hey, we are Judah, God's not going to judge us. You really see that in the prophecy of Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah kept saying, the Babylonians are coming, the Babylonians are coming. And the other prophets were saying, God's not going to cause us to be taken away to Babylon. We're God's people, for God's sake. It is exactly what happened. Judgment can come upon us just as much as it can come upon the world. We can't depend on governments, friendships, retirement plans, or anything else to protect us from dangers of this world or even the judgment that is coming. In a verse there, I think it's about verse 21 or 2 or 3, Isaiah says to Judah, hey, you need to wake up. Judgment is coming upon the whole earth. Maybe that's what we need to hear. Judgment is coming. It's called the tribulation period. We need to wake up. We need to watch. And we need to be ready. But most of all, there is only one sure foundation for our lives. And His name is Jesus Christ. All right, comments or questions? Hearing none, moving along because we have a business meeting here in about 10 minutes. Let's go to announcements. So announcements are youth sponsors, grounds committee, and the safety team are going to meet Sunday, February 15th. I think you know what times. I think the youth sponsors, grounds committee right after the morning service. Safety team is going to meet at 5 p.m. Ladies Bible study, you know about those. I'm scanning here. On the 19th, a week from tomorrow, is the senior adult game day here at the church, 2 to 4 p.m. We will have an all teachers meeting February the 22nd at 2 p.m. And then contributions are ready and available in the office. And also for those of you, and I hope that's many of you, who like to get information on our visitors, we, I say Brother Zach, updated the Reach folder that's down the hallway. So it's not the first one, but on down the hallway, there's a folder that says Reach Someone, and that has been updated. And with our most recent visitors, the ones that we have gotten information on. We don't get information on all of them, but we updated that, or Zach updated that today. Okay? Any other announcements? Yes?
A lot of people ask for the recipes that were used Saturday. There's some copies. Are they still in the fellowship hall?
No, they're in the kitchen on the counter by the chips.
In the kitchen, on the counter, by the chips.
In the kitchen. Okay.
Kitchen.
So in the counter, that as you walk into the kitchen, that right there. Recipes from Saturday. Good time, good food, and good Valentine's banquet. Okay? Others? If not, it's time for me to say goodnight to our online audience. Thanks for being here. Send us your prayer concerns. We'll help you pray for them.